Hey, what's up, everyone? This is going to be the 90th opening that I'd like to share with you. And this one, again, it's a variation from somebody that I really admire and, of course, respect. I made it into a short form. So, it's basically Taichan, a short form for Taiwanchan's nickname. So, he's none other than Chang Chun-Yi from Taiwan. And something very interesting about him as a player is that I see that he's one of the most effective players to kind of come into the scene with probably fewer years of experience compared to many of those very seasoned players, and to kind of come in almost with very few years of experience and immediately use a very effective way of training and preparing for Othello to achieve maximum results. So his first World Othello Championship was actually in 2016, and he managed to achieve an overall impressive sixth or seventh position, at least easily in the top 10. And then thereafter in 2019 WOC, he almost broke into the World Othello Championship semifinals, but unfortunately he lost the playoff match and ended up as fifth. In the world, but still very impressive for somebody who has very, very few years of experience. And I think he's somebody who has improved tremendously and very, very rapidly. So, again, one of the openings that he really specializes in a set of openings as white would be playing the diagonal opening and leading up into his kind of variation of the chimney opening. He plays this so well that I think in 2019 WOC he actually managed to draw the eventual world champion, and he also managed to take down a few players. So even for myself, my own experience is that when I face him, I probably wouldn't want to play into a standard book to this particular opening of his because he is so stable and so strong with this opening. So let's just go into the sequence, which is the typical diagonal opening lead up all the way d6 right now, and then of course the cow opening c5, followed by chimney leading up the chimney opening. And of course, if you were to play to the standard d7 book, he plays to the c4, and you play to the c3, which is the standard opening best book opening. So essentially, if you know the opening together with him, you probably exchange blows up to this particular point, and over here to c7. And like I said in the previous episodes, the typical response over here is e7 rather than f3. Most players play e7. And over here, his kind of kickoff of his opening variation is an interesting d8. So d8 typically forms up this kind of semi-box region whereby you allow black to play a very easy and quiet move. So the typical sequence that kind of follows is to play to f7. Most players would follow this as the book best sequence, followed by white cutting into the center and black taking f8, leaving it as one square gap. Also because white has established this vertical line control and this diagonal line control. So black takes into the center, white feeds off, and black captures the edge, and white goes to b3, and then followed by both options are possible for b4 and e3, but in terms of just following the book, cutting off excess from for white in the e7 this would mean playing e3, and of course white, as from taiwanchan, the top player from Taiwan, he wouldn't have any issue preparing up to this point at least for his opening. And over here, the kind of tricky or counterintuitive options then come in because b4, c2, and d2 all seems like very viable options to play, but in fact, they have a minor difference. And if you were to allow the software to kind of continue processing the moves, you would realize that there is a subtle difference. It's a very narrow alley to kind of go down, and of course, the exchange becomes a lot more difficult for black in the mid game over here because black, as a result of the sequence, has already established a quick unbalanced edge, 5 dis unbalanced edge to the bottom. So any moves that you make, that you are not too sure of in the mid game would result in a lot of repercussions. So I would say that this opening is very powerful because most of the options allow white to actually make minor mistakes, but for black, if you were to make a kind of huge mistake, you would probably result in a situation whereby you can't really come back from it easily. So I think a natural sequence would be to just jump in to form the cross, white takes the book move. I think this is typical. I wouldn't say that any of these moves to f1 or f2 are intuitive, mainly because if you play f1, you allow white to jump into f2 and essentially poison the f3 moves and most of the moves around here. So again, white will probably not play f3. So yeah, if you were to play, say, f2, then you allow white to kind of nicely nestle himself into the center. Couple of options, easy ones for him. So that's probably something you want to avoid over here. And of course, if you manage to find maybe some of these moves before, you realize it's very simple for white to just kind of play through the sequence, just cut into the center and just continue. And you realize most of your moves are fairly poisoned. It's very difficult for you to kind of follow up here. So if black were to play a5, white can just feed off the edge simply, and then thereafter go for a centralizing move. So I think this sequence is fairly easy for white, and one of the strengths of this opening variation is that it allows white to almost seemingly play the mid game effortlessly. So I would kind of recommend this opening for players who want to kind of play white diagonal and want to establish themselves. This opening is a very tricky one to actually play against. So obviously, if you were to look at this opening and you want to counter it, you probably want to look at earlier variations to kind of avoid going into this particular book. So I think this particular book is favorable for white. And of course, if you're an advanced player looking to get some form of consistency, you can probably consider this set of openings. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.